Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Alexandra van der Val and I'm going to be host for your session. Today's session on C-level cheat sheet to security readiness will be presented by Niall Merrigan, Head of Cybersecurity at Capgemini Norway. We highly recommend that you call into this webinar from your mobile using local numbers provided. For best experience, please also close all your audio applications for duration of this webinar. This webinar will take approximately half an hour, including a short Q&A session at the end. Since everyone is calling is muted, please type in your questions to your GoToWebinar control panel and we'll bring them up during the Q&A session. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to our presenter, Niall Merrigan.
And thank you, Alexandra. Good morning, everyone. I know it's a bit of an early start this morning for many of you. This is a C-level security cheat sheet. This is a very simple introduction or kind of a verification for many of you on what you will be doing in a security context. First off, my name is Niall Merrigan. I am the head of cybersecurity at Capgemini Norway. And I'm also a Microsoft Regional Director, one of 160 C-level advisors to Microsoft who advise on topics such as, in my case, security and cloud. You have my contact details here, but you'll be able to get them on the last slide. Now, before we begin, I'd like to kind of run into a quick poll, and which Mikael will bring up for me, to get an idea of what is your gut feeling, as in, so this is like, without really thinking about it, what is your gut feeling on your security posture? In other words, are you feeling, is it good? Could it be better? Are you struggling? Or very much do you not know? So we'll just wait a couple of seconds once people put in their votes. And then hopefully Mikael, my beautiful assistant, will tell me exactly what has happened in the background. And should we close it about now? Because I think there's only about 12 or 13 of us at the moment, so it's quickly enough. Excellent. So this is just, we're not really kind of going to show you much about more, it's just to get an idea so you can look at the start of this webinar and then towards the end, get a better kind of feeling of what's going on. So we're in really strange times. The COVID-19 has completely changed how we work. It's even changed how we think about how we should do stuff. For many of us in the Nordic countries, it just means that we maintain the same normal distance we had before. But for other countries, they now actually kind of do the Nordic, I would say the bus queue idea. They stay within 2 meters apart. But we have considerably shifted how we work. We have now moved to home office by default. This has been a huge shift for many of us. And it also means that it's put a lot of pressure on IT resources, but it also has shown how quickly IT will react to a pandemic. So it is a kind of a huge thing for us there. But the idyllic situation I have on screen now is not really what has happened, especially in, say, for example, Norway and Denmark, where Barnehagen and schools have been closed. This has meant that now when people are working from home, they are a bit more stressed. There's a bit more distractions. So things like security are probably not on top of mind. But for us as businesses and for you as IT decision makers and as decision makers as well, how do you ensure that the people who are working remotely from your office on your data and your systems are acting in a secure way? Do you know how fit you are? Do you know what state you're in? And very often the only way we can know if something is good or bad is we actually put it to the test. And when we're at kind of, are we fit for race? Are we good enough? And this webinar and these kind of little 7 things I'm going to tell this morning are very much a kind of a quick checklist that you can go in and ask very much a yes, no, or partially answer to get an idea of how well you're actually doing in your security posture today. And it may seem extremely obvious, but the first one should really be, do you even have a remote work policy? And it kind of sounds like, well, Niall, that's a bit of a silly question. But the number of companies who don't is surprisingly high because they never had remote work as an option. For a lot of us, remote work is a thing we take on a Thursday evening, Friday morning, when maybe we've had a glass of wine in the evening and decide, do you know what, I won't get up so early tomorrow morning and I'll have a nice kind of good day at home and I'll be finished early for a Friday. But the problem is now is that we are so well connected and we have to be working from remote offices that it means that people need to understand, they need to have guidance on how they should perform their job when not working in an office context. And this raises the second part. Are your employees aware? Do they understand their security responsibilities themselves? It's very often that we as people will be going, it won't affect me because I'm not in an office environment, even though very often now we're in a less secure environment at home. Your network is not protected the same way as your corporate network would be. And if you're not using VPN solutions, if we have some other ones, then we're possibly going to do some mistake because we learn from experience. As we are young, we make a lot more mistakes than when we are old. Unfortunately, sometimes the ones when we make when we are older are a lot larger and more significant. But the problem for us now is to kind of see how can we work together and get our employees to take responsibility. Because very often, if you told employees and people who are working, if you make a mistake, people may not get paid. And if they take that responsibility together, then they will do it. And that makes it much easier for you as an employer to have your kind of trust your employees to do the right thing because they know their responsibility. With the remote work policy and ensuring that they have good awareness and training, this is an important step. And it is always a commitment to lifelong learning when it comes to this type of thing. It can't be just something you do on the first day of work and say, you know what, now you're secure. It's a constant evolution. People need to be reminded, not, I would say, kind of constantly updated, but more kind of they would need to say, just think about this again and just get it in top of mind, and especially in the current times. Because unfortunately, and fortunately, if you want to look at it this way, email is still the top one way we communicate in business. Email is still the way we work. Everyone sends email, everyone receives it. And also, it is the top way as a hacker you will get into a system. Now, we've probably heard of terms like phishing and spam, but you may not have heard of a thing called business email compromise. And this is a very lucrative way of getting into systems. And I'll explain what it means first, but I'm going to show you the numbers. So these are fantastic from the FBI's Internet Crime Compliance Center, which is a very cool tongue twister if you want to get your kids to do it. But a 2,370% increase in financial losses, in estimated 5.3 billion, like milliard US dollars, and 131 countries affected by this. It's kind of mind-boggling numbers, but you're probably kind of maybe asking, is this really? And what it is a very simple technique where spam is sending email to people where they don't really want it and trying to do it. Phishing is trying to lure you to get you to click on something. Business email compromise is where we know your credentials, we know your login, we know your password, and we use that then to send an email as you. Now, when you think about this, imagine if you send an email to an accountant or, for example, payments at, say, 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, Friday evening, end of quarter, and you're from your mobile, you say, dear accountant, we have a supplier, they haven't been paid yet, they are screaming for their money, please pay approximately 500,000 US dollars to this account. I'm on my mobile, I'll ring you later. Your name carries weight. And with that, people will do what you say because they're in response mode. They're under pressure, they're stressed. And when it comes back, they say, well, I never sent that email. Well, it came from internally in our system and it wasn't flagged as spam. This is what business email compromise does. I have personal experience of this. My cousin who works as he's an entrepreneur, he's a builder in London, rang me about 18 months ago. And he said, Niall, someone has managed to steal £50,000 from us. I said, okay, what happened? And they said, they changed the invoice that went out from our email and changed the bank account. So it went to a different bank account, which then got forwarded to the Ukraine. So in one single email, they made 50,000 British pounds. Now that is a very high ROI for one single username and password. And when you think about it, the people are going to try and make money no matter what. And they're going to take advantage of stuff very quickly as well. If we look at this email here, it's a sample phishing email that was sent on the 28th of January, 2020. And it shows about the Singapore specialist coronavirus safety measures. Now, on the 20th of January, most of us we're only starting to become aware of Corona. But this is already sending out a potential phishing email or getting someone to click on things. We also know that people are going to take advantage of your email, the fact that you're going to have to send out policies or do things and communicate. So they're going to try and interject themselves there. And unfortunately, all kind of forms of medium are susceptible to this. And we use a tactic known as fear of missing out, FOMO. It's a very common sales technique. Buy now or forever lose it. And we will do something like this. We will send you an example of what I would call free babysitting, using Netflix. Like for many of us who have children, including myself, Netflix is a godsend when we want to have 1 hour to be able to do something. So in this case, you can see straight away, they're going to send you a text message, get you to click on something, and it says run on the site. Now, it's poor English, but it kind of, if you read this quickly and it's a text message, which is very often more intimate than an email, they will get you that way. So the kind of question you need to ask is, are your privileged users, this is people like HR, payments, and you as a C-levels, are you protected? Do you have correct filters in place and controls? And if you have, you done a health check on them lately? Because when we communicate, the communication plans are hugely important here. How we do it is very important. Very often, communications can be misinterpreted. And when this happens, it means that something will go wrong. In your security posture, how you communicate you should do something or how you communicate to your employees is highly important. Like I like this simple SMS because it is a very simple way of showing that something that is so innocuous can be misinterpreted incorrectly. So how you have your communication plan in place is an important part of your security strategy. And also another one that is kind of possibly a little overlooked, but very often one of the core backbones is monitoring. Monitoring is this idea that we have controls in place, systems in place that do all this magic in the back to keep us safe. But they always also tell us that something is wrong, very much like our own bodies. When something is wrong with your body, it gives you pain. Now, you can ignore that pain, as very often men do, and not go to the doctor, and it might go away. But in the form of a kind of security threat, very often a butterfly flapping its wings on the other side of the Atlantic very often has negative effects on this side of the world. So the same way here, you have to keep an eye on everything, and your systems need to tell you. This is often overlooked because we say we have antivirus. That's great. Do you know the number of kind of potential hits you got every month? No. Well, if you don't, do you know if it's actually working? So keeping this monitoring in place, and the simple question you need to ask is, do we have this in place and are we observing it? Because with all the controls, like email, like your monitoring, and like your communication plans and your awareness, something invariably will go wrong because this is the way things work, unfortunately. And how you can handle a crisis or incident is going to be determined by your preparedness. Now, when we talk about things like incident management, it's a term I think that we use in the security industry to describe when something goes wrong, how do we deal with it and fix it? It is a very difficult time because very often we don't know what happened and we are trying and struggling to recover from something that has hit us out of the blind. And this we call the fog of war. It is you don't have full overview, you cannot see clearly, you don't know where you're going, you just kind of have to make assumptions. Unfortunately, we all know everything about assumptions, they're very bad for us. So if you get someone coming up and saying, I think, the straight response is, don't tell me what you think, tell me what you know. What you think is generally backed by feelings, which can change. What you know is generally backed by facts, and these don't. So when you know something, you can make a better decision. You also should have a playbook. Playbooks are a set of rules and advisories that you will have in place that tell you what to do in the case of emergency. We see these all over buildings. In case of emergency, do not use the lift. Run down the stairs, evacuate to this point. We have to have the same thing if there's a security incident. Asking, do you have or have you got this process in place, will give you a peace of mind. And this will also be backed by gathering up intelligence. Intelligence services, or what we call threat intelligence services, are a kind of a supplementary security tooling or process that allow you to get information about what is happening in the world so that you can be better defended. Much like if you were to go to the stock market and buy stock without looking at the stock market or previous kind of performance, you would be considered quite foolish. Or if you were to buy a company or invest in something without doing due diligence. So the thing here is an intelligence service will distill down information from multiple sources, put it together in a nice, easy way to do, and consume. And it can be consumed by your IT department. It can be consumed by further ups. In our case, Capgemini, I think, is offering a 1-month free subscription to certain services we offer, but there are many out there for you to choose from, because getting information from all over the world is a very good way to understand when something is happening. For example, as you saw before with the emails towards Singapore, these emails are moving west. This information style or this attack style is moving west. So if something happens in financial markets in for example, China, they're very often, if they succeed, will go towards more Western targets as well. Now, the final bit is something that is very much in the news this morning. With Boris Johnson being kind of put into intensive care due to COVID-19, the contingency plan that they had in place was to get Dominic Raab. Now, here is an example of where something might go wrong for you. What happens if somebody gets sick, or in some cases, may not be you, but some key person in your organization where you only have one of them? Is there a contingency plan in place that allows you to say, when something goes wrong here, they can do their job? And unfortunately, in the current situation with COVID-19, it is effectively likely that someone will get sick and something will happen to them. And this causes us to figure out who will be the next in line. Who will be the next person that will take over? What happens if? Contingency planning is very often left off the table because we as humans are quite optimistic. But unfortunately, we just have to kind of, with security planning and certain things like that, you kind of have to say, well, if Lynn is sick, the CEO is sick, we now need to get John in place so they can run this. If the IT manager is sick or the security manager is sick, who do we take over and who can do all this stuff for us to make sure our business can keep working? Now, there's a quick run overview for you, and now you should kind of look back at the first answers you gave and give a different view of maybe, are you feeling, yes, I feel validated that certain things are now better. I have those in place. Some of them say, Niall, I could probably do it a tune-up. Very often that's probably going to be the most gut feeling. Or you're now running scared, which is, I'm sorry, that's unfortunate, but most of these can be quickly turned around for you. But because we are going to redefine what short, medium, and long term are, it used to be that short term would be something like, in the end of a quarter, medium term, end of half year, and long term beyond that. Now it could be even like, for example, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and 8 weeks. So if you are looking for what you should do now, look at what is effectively the low-hanging fruit. What is the kind of best things to do? What are the most effective ones you can do? And for me, if you were asking my opinion, if you were into this webinar, the thing I would be looking at first would be nearly in order of this: having a remote work policy, having your employees awareness taken care of, and then your email protection routines. As you kind of go further on down, a lot of this will be coming as something you may need to say, well, we might need to put that off for a couple of weeks. The first three are possibly the most important right now because they have the greatest effect in increasing your security posture. The rest can then be taken, the next three, for example, communication, monitoring, and incident management, can be taken as possibly to be done a little bit later, and the last two should be definitely have in place further on. It is also a good idea if you want to download the Capgemini Research Institute's report, which is called Boosting Cybersecurity Immunity, Confronting Cybersecurity Risks in Today's Work from Home World. A lot of the information I have shown this morning can be obtained there as well, but with more facts and figures and some good supporting argument around it. And finally, we have two lovely pictures here. My colleague in Sweden, which is the name of Peter Hansen, who is the cybersecurity officer in Scandinavia, is one of the contact points, and myself, who I'm my name is Niall Merrigan, and I'm the head of cybersecurity at Capgemini in Norway. I am going to now leave and see if we have some questions available. I'm not too sure if Alexander will jump in or if we have anything for that, but you are free to use this next couple of minutes as if you would like to ask a question, and it doesn't have to be related to the webinar. If you have kind of a security question you'd like to ask in general, please do ask. We can try and take it for you.
Thank you, Niall. I see that we actually don't have any particular questions from the audience, and I would like to ask everybody to feel free and still pop the questions. I think from my perspective, that was a beautiful overview of the cybersecurity readiness assessment of what people actually have to do. But maybe if we can, and just for your information, I posted in the chat box for everybody a link to the report that you have just mentioned, so you can quickly directly click the link and download it. I guess my only question as also attendee of this webinar, if you could go back to the actions that you have listed for everybody, because I think that's an important starting point of what to do next. I think when it comes to remote work policy, what would you say that are the key components? Because I'm imagining that such policy can vary when it comes to understanding what such policy should be from company to company. So what would you say are the key components of the remote work policy that it should include?
So that's a fantastic question. For me, one of the things I think with a remote work policy, it should be clear. It shouldn't have you could or whatever. It should kind of say, here is how you do something. When you connect to our network, you must use the VPN. Do not browse sites you would not browse in the office. Because unfortunately that happens. Like, when you're working at home, you might have, because you don't have the same controls in place, because it's your home network, especially if you're not using a VPN, you might have, like, for example, some site on the background and kind of maybe Netflix or something like that. It's kind of this, very often, this is where I find that we make mistakes because we forget where we are. We should treat our work computer as a work computer, not as a personal machine. So one of the things I've kind of told people to do is not kind of let your children use it, because tiny little hackers have great minds and getting around controls. But also things like kind of key, I'd say, metrics to say this is how you should make sure you're doing something right. The main thing with a remote work policy is it should make sure that the way the person works is the same way that they would work in the office. So if it's a case of you work with sensitive data on a regular basis, they say you're not allowed to work. You should make sure you don't have people overlooking your screen. So if you're working in a cafe or whatever, it should have a screen protector. If you're taking calls, you're not allowed to take meeting calls in public places where there'll be sensitive information, for example. And they should have a lot of kind of the core kind of do's and don'ts, and be kind of clear, and don't kind of stand up with saying, well, you could or whatever. Give clear scenarios and explain to people why these are in place. And once people understand why you're telling them to do something as well, they will become more likely to do it in the way you would like them to do it. So with a remote work policy, it also is a kind of thing that it shouldn't be too excessive. It should allow a certain amount of where people can do the correct job for themselves, because you want to be able to trust your employees as well.
Thank you, Niall. I think that answers my question. And again, since I don't have any questions from the audience, I suggest we close the session 5 minutes early. However, please feel to reach out to us, as Niall mentioned, either to him in Norway or to Peter in Sweden. But we also welcome questions from anybody from any other countries if you're attending from outside of these two countries. And we are happy to help with any questions you might have that are very specific to your organization. and also to have a workshop with you and to assess whether or not your cybersecurity policy makes sense. So thank you, Niall, for a beautiful session, and everybody for attending. After the session, you will receive the recording of the session, so feel free to share it within your organization, and we hope to hear from you. Thank you.